No, what you want to do is you want to turn around, go back this way, head over to the stream, follow the stream a little until you get to Quercus rubra. Once you're there, I think you should see signs for the restroom. You're very welcome. Bees of the genus Halictus are found on all continents except Australia. There are about 200 species worldwide and about 10 in North America. This is primarily a Palearctic genus that managed to spill into North America thousands of years ago. In this video, we will take a closer look at three large, non-metallic, and very common species. Halictus rubicundus is Holarctic, Halictus ligatus is transcontinental, and Halictus farinosus is strictly western. All the species in the genus excavate nests in the ground, and most exhibit some form of complex social nesting behavior. The story of the American species of Halictus begins in 1791 in a small town in southwest Germany called Oringen. There, a naturalist named Johann Ludwig Christ published his entomological masterwork, The Natural History, Classification, and Nomenclature of the Bees, Wasps, and Ants. In it, he described a bee he called der Rottrufen, the redback, Apis rubicunda. Halictus rubicundus ranges across the entire northern hemisphere. This is one of the largest distributions of any bee species. Like all Halictus, the females have pollen scopa on the tibia of the hind legs. Rubicundus has a dark body color that lacks any metallic tints. A white pubescence covers the thorax, and hairs tinged with reddish-orange cover the legs. The males have longer antennae and yellow on their legs and clypeus. They also have a narrower abdomen and no pollen scopa on their legs. Females are just a bit smaller than worker honeybees. Rubicundus is peculiar in that it is socially polymorphic, meaning their populations run the gamut of solitary to eusocial nesting behavior. The genus was born in 1802 in Paris when Pierre Latreille published his Histoire naturelle. In this, he introduced the new genus Halictus and included 4 European species. 32 years after that, in North America, on the banks of the Wabash River in Indiana, Thomas Say described a bee he named Halictus ligatus. In his travels throughout North America, Say must have collected this common species several times over. It is possible that this is the most abundant wild bee in North America. Halictus ligatus ranges throughout the United States and into southern Canada. Because it is eusocial, there is a variety of sizes of females. While this is probably the case with the other Halictus species, it is very pronounced in this one. The males are smaller, have some yellow on their legs and clypeus, and have longer antennae. Again, males don't participate in nest making, and so have no need for pollen collecting hair on their legs. The next North American Halictus in our group to be described would come from California and find its way to Frederick Smith, working at the British Museum in 1853. He would name his California bee farinosus because, as he wrote, it has a powdery or dusty appearance. None of the specimens I collected seemed to fit this description. Nevertheless, Halictus farinosus is a large bee with shaggy hair and the grizzled look of an old 49er. Farinosus has an eastern counterpart, Halictus parallelis, which is very similar. The males of Farinosus follow the pattern of the Rubicundus males, with yellow on their clypeus and legs, a sleeker look than the females, and with no pollen scopa on their legs. After 150 years of describing species, it was time to sort it all out. In 1941, Grace Adelbert Sandhouse, working at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, revised the genus. She recognized 9 valid species and provided outstanding illustrations. 24 years after Sandhouse, in 1960, Theodore Mitchell, working at the North Carolina State College, covered 4 eastern species of Halictus in his Bees of the Eastern United States. And in 1973, Radcliffe Roberts, working at Oregon State University, revised the western species. Along with a partially illustrated key, Roberts gave great synopses on the known biology of individual species. 38 years later, in 2011, John Pickering at the University of Georgia, along with John Asher at the American Museum of Natural History, launched Discover Life, a website that uses matrix-based identification guides for all sorts of taxa. Their guides to North American bees are extensive, and it includes all 10 North American species of Halictus. There you will see range maps for each species. Range maps will give you a sense of the scope of your problem. You need only consider the species in your collecting area. Most other species should be ruled out. Assemble your first impressions here and then move on to the physical clues. Your most obvious physical clue is the length of the bee. Farinosus and rubicundus come in at around 10 to 11 millimeters, and Halictus ligatus comes in at about 8 to 10 millimeters. All are smaller than a worker honeybee, which is about a dozen millimeters long. Add this clue to the ones you've gathered looking at range maps and move on. Looking at them head-on, we see the species are all quite similar. Males and females differ in that the males have yellow on their clypeus and have a narrower face than the females. As for species recognition, Ligatus does have a very round face compared to the others, but without a comparison, this is not very helpful. Females show differences in their apical fascia. On farinosus, the bands are quite broad. It gives farinosus a western homesteader look, while the paler, narrower bands of rubicundus brings to mind an 18th century military uniform. Next, if you've got good magnification, take a look at the inner tibial spur on the hind leg. Rubicundus has a row of very long teeth, whereas other species have a less pronounced jagged edge. Backlighting may make it easier to assess this difficult character. A much easier difference can be seen in their wings. The wings on farinosus are darker or infuscate. The wings of rubicundus are mostly clear. They darken slightly at the ends, but they're not like farinosus's. This is best seen against a white background. Again, without both to compare, this may not be as helpful as it appears. Ligatus females can usually be spotted by their jutting cheeks. They have prominent turbuckles at the lower ends of their gena. This is a highly variable structure, so use with caution. However, none of the other species have anything like it, so its presence is strong evidence your bee is ligatus. Ligatus females can also be spotted by looking at their head to thorax width ratio. Ligatus has a broad head, broader than their thorax. The other species have heads that are narrower than their thorax. For the males, there is variability in the hair on their sternites. The males of Ligatus have long suberect hairs on the second and third sternites. Farinosus and rubicundus do not. Lastly, rubicundus and farinosus can be distinguished based on additional features of their sternites. On the fourth sternite of rubicundus, there is a brush of hairs, absent in farinosus. Also, sternite 5 is deeply emarginate on rubicundus and not similarly modified on farinosus. Well, that should get you started. Good luck. As always, a special thanks go to the internet resources that make these videos possible, including the Biodiversity Heritage Library, Discover Life, and Iowa State University's Bug Guide. Look for them online.